Jo-Ann Fabrics may or may not be going out of business, but I'm still going to be sewing, and I ran to my local one just to get some pre-sheared fabric and some coordinating green, so let's sew a project. Hi, I'm Sydney, welcome back to my Flock and Squawk. I sew, craft, and do a whole bunch of other things, so let's just talk about this project before we dive right in. So I have their pre-sheared fabric, and one of the project recommendations for it is a one-seam dress. So you get your sheared fabric, and you can sew it into a dress, and then I have some coordinating green that I'm going to be doing a set that I can wear with the dress or separately, a top and short set. So let's dive right in. Diving right into this project, we are starting with the shorts using Simplicity Easy to Sew 1520A. This pattern is for pajama bottoms, but I think that it'll be perfect for this set. I'm doing view C, which is the shortest length of all of them, and I'm making them out of the green material that I just showed you. It's a gauzy type material, so lightweight, flowy, and definitely going to fray a ton. This pattern, the way it's laid out, is that you have sizes fit for the whole family. However, they stack the sizes as well as the views on top of each other. So in order to preserve the paper for me to be able to make different sizes and lengths down the line, I traced out the pattern that I wanted onto some freezer paper, used that as my actual pattern, and preserved the paper, like I said, for later and for a different time. Freezer paper is a great option for this because you can use pins with it as well as iron it directly to your fabric and it will stick. I did not iron it this time and instead used pattern weights to hold it down while I cut. And then I brought out the serger to serge my raw edges because, like I said, this material is going to fray a ton. This is sort of an optional step, or if you don't have a serger, I highly recommend using a zigzag stitch in your seam allowance. I followed the pattern instructions, which say to do the inner thigh seam, and then you do the crotch seam, this U shape. Once those are done, you sew the side seams, and then you can add your elastic waistband by making a channel and feeding it through. With our shorts done, let's get on to the next step. So it is a few days later from those first initial clips, but my shorts are done. They turned out really cute, and I'm going to save the reveal for the end, but I put in my little tag off camera, so it does say that it's handmade with love by me, but we got some shorts. They're super high-waisted, cute, comfortable, perfect for under this dress or with the matching top that we are going to work on drafting now. So this is not going to be the most amazing tutorial, it's not really a tutorial, it's more just sharing what I'm doing and how I'm achieving this project. So we are going to be drafting the top, and in just a second I'll grab my book. And this is the book that I'm going to be using as my main reference. It's what I have been using as my reference for drafting patterns of clothing for myself so far. So this is it. It's Make Your Own Patterns by Renee Berg. It's been around a while, and in the very back of the book it has quarter scale versions that you can scale up, and that's what I did for the basic block. So here you can see just like the general how you scale things up, and I traced the basic block and I've used that as my base reference for pattern drafting. I'm going to be going with the Drafting Basic Patterns, page 25, how to make this a dartless top base pattern. So I'm going to be doing that, and then we are going to be adding in the collar and just drafting based on this book as well as just general internet information. So let's get to it. Getting started with the top, I'm tracing out using this pokey wheel. I'm not really sure what its actual name is, but basically you can layer stuff on top of paper and then use that to poke through, and it'll perforate whatever is underneath, or in this case also my original pattern that I am perforating. But I am copying out my basic block and using that as the base on a new piece of paper to draft out, because there are changes that need to be made, some cuts to open up darts and just change the basic block to make it dartless.
I decided that it was too difficult for me to explain with how I filmed just how you're supposed to do that. I highly recommend The Closet Historian for more drafting related topics.
So I have the front dartless drafted out, lots of tape to hold this together. But yeah, we got there. So now it's time to do it all over again, kind of, for the back of the dartless blouse pattern, and then we will figure out exactly what I'm doing.
And then here I am just doing the same exact thing with the pokey wheel and tracing to make the back dartless.
Alright, so I have my pattern pieces drafted, and next time I see you, I will have a plan of exactly how I want this top to look. So I will see you then with the final details, thoughts, after I've plotted it out completely. But I have the top of my dartless version completely done, and then the back where we just pretty much straightened out so we don't need the dart.
And for good measure, why not just watch me draft another little element for this project, and that is dolman sleeves. Now I think this kind of messed me up down the line, but dolman sleeves are where it's kind of just like a built-in sleeve to the bodice. You don't have a separate sleeve piece, which highly appealed to me by not having to set in sleeves. But it definitely changed the fit perhaps, or if it is just my dartless base block. But that's for later. Here's the drafting.
Hey guys, so it's been about a week since the last time I've talked directly to the camera about this project. And like I said, I was going to finalize what I wanted for this top. And I did it. I drafted out some dolman sleeves. And I did get started on drafting a collar for it, but I kind of want to see how the rest of the blouse comes together before I worry about the collar, because that's one of the last things to do. It's basically like collar and buttons. That'll be the final, but we can work on cutting out and getting the rest of the blouse together and seeing how that kind of feels. I'm going to be using the same green as I was earlier, that gauze, to match the shorts that I made. But here is the dolman sleeve. I actually made it out of stretch knit material as a t-shirt and had to alter it because, of course, stretch doesn't need as much ease. But it came out super cute, and I will insert some clips here of what that looks like. But this fabric does not stretch, so we're just going to go for it and see how that goes.
So I jumped right into cutting these pieces out, but first I had to mark out my seam allowance. So I just used some chalk as a rough guide because none of my base pattern blocks contain seam allowance. So I always have to factor in about 1 centimeter of seam allowance. I also added 5-ish centimeters to the center front on both panels. That way I could have a button overlap, and here I am serging all the raw edges and getting things prepped so we can work on the actual fun stuff, such as facings and collars and whatnot. And I will be with you and Judy in a moment.
So here's what we're looking at the moment. The center front is overlapped in the front a little bit. It's on Judy. I just did shoulder and side seams. And I don't know, guys, like, I think there's just too much ease, too much just fabric in the front. Like, even with the overlap, there's just too much armpit. And I don't know if that's the dolman or if it's just this dartless front construction. So I'm going to take it in. I basically just need to take it in till the waist, like kind of a C shape, maybe.
Like I said earlier, I think that the fact that I added dolman sleeves is part of the issue for the fit, but first thing I had to do was unpick that full side seam. When I do the second half, after I make this alteration, I actually just cut off the serging and made it easier on myself, because this fabric, it does not like being unpicked. The fraying just really takes over. But basically what I did to alter it is I put it on Judy inside out, so that way I could pin and get a better idea of the fit. Because I have this overlap at the center front, I pinned where that is so that way the crossover would not be altered. And then I just sort of fit it to Judy and then tried it on myself to see how that would work. I made a couple changes from there and then just worked on it.
After a little workshopping, I've got it so that way I need to sew along this curve as opposed to sort of the straight down, and that gives me a much better shape. So you can't really see it from this angle, but allow me to bring you in. So you can see here the white stitching is where it will be, and then here is what the other side that I haven't touched is, and it's too straight down, like I need more of an armpit and a little shaping. So I'm going to do this on that side and serge them. So I'm back again off camera. I did the hem on the sleeves, and now it is time for me to figure out the button situation on how far to fold each side and, you know, just work out the center front. So I gave myself 4.5 centimeters on each side center front to work with for the button, and I have some fusible interfacing that is long enough that I can do for both sides, so that way it's more stable instead of quite as flowy. And then I'll also probably do this in the collar, but I'm thinking that I will just fold over each side, see how it overlaps, and then sew the either side, obviously doing the interfacing at some point, but just kind of boop, boop, boop. That's kind of the thought process, at least.
I spent a fair bit of time thinking about what exactly I wanted to do to finish this top and have it be, I don't know, nice, neat, almost professional, one might say. So I ended up doing some facings as opposed to just folding stuff over. So for the facings, I just traced out my front and back pattern for the neckline area / front center button. And I did it exactly as what the pattern said, or my original pieces were. And then I just sort of altered it to be a specific shape, you know, just the front center buttons and neckline area with a good amount. So that way it would be just facing and not a full lining. Here I am just cutting it out of the same material. Because I'm using the fusible stuff, I don't really need to worry about using a different type of lining. It can all be the same green, and so that way when the collar is folded over and I have it like a camp collar, everything looks cohesive, it's all the same, and not like an accent fabric or something of that nature, because I don't really have any accent fabric that I wanted to use other than perhaps the dress itself's fabric. But here I am just sewing away and adding the facings and getting it ready for the collar.
So my facings for the front are done, and I sewed a tiny bit into the neckline area so I can have a little bit of a camp collar, split collar. And now it's time to measure and draft out the actual collar itself. But once that is drafted and I like sew it, attach it, then it'll all just be the finishing. So the hem and the buttons, which I don't know if I have buttons that really work, but I'll have to go through my stuff. But after that, it'll be like fully ready, and we can finish off this project with the one seam dress, which is actually not one seam, it's 2 seams at minimum if you are doing a hem, which I want to hem it up because it'll be a bit long for my taste with its natural length of fabric. But yep, I'm so excited. Let's draft out the collar. I'm just going to be following the instructions from the book again and probably Googling some stuff to get a better idea of how it's drafted. But that's where we are at the moment. Let's get this project done today.
So for drafting the collar, I just followed the instructions in the book where you measure the neckline, mark that off, do the height of the collar, and then some slight adjustments, such as taking up the center front about 1 centimeter so that way it curves nicely, and making it pointy. I then cut it out of the green twice so that way I would have 2 of them, and then once out of the fusible for the stabilization. I then fused the stabilization to the one side and then sewed the 2 collar pieces together. I also serged all of its edges just to be safe, and then once it was sewn together, I flipped it right ways out. I made sure to clip the corners so that way they would be more pointed as opposed to more rounded and kind of lumpy. Then I did some pinning to make sure the collar would fit properly. There was just a tiny bit difference between the collar and the actual top, so I just sort of hid that in the very center back. It's very little, you don't really notice it. Then I sewed the collar on one side, folded it over and sandwiched so all my raw edges with the collar are fully encapsulated. This is a wonderful technique and it doesn't require anything really extra. I do know that some people do like an additional strip of fabric to hide the edges or like a binding for that. But with this technique, if you don't mind some top stitching along the back neckline, you can really just go for this. And then I did top stitching down the center front as well as the collar edges, just so everything has like a nice neat stitch line, because I like that sort of accent.
I have the collar and top stitching all done, facing is done, and now it's just time for buttons. And I pulled these out of my stash. They are 3/4 inch buttons. I have 6 of them, which I think will be plenty, and I'm kind of thinking that I'll crop the top. You know, for me it would be like right where my pants that I'm currently wearing hit, which are just a little bit longer than that. But I'm thinking these recycled wood looking buttons will be cute. So let's, I already did a test thing on my machine for doing buttonholes, but we are going to give it a go. I just need to make sure that I make the buttonholes the correct size for these buttons. So let's just take it over to the machine and give it a go, and then we will work on the hemming and finally be wrapping up this project with a dress.
Getting started with the buttons, the first thing that I did was measure and mark the distance between each button. How I did this was to measure from where I wanted the first button to start to where I wanted the last button to end, and then I divided it by 6 because that's how many buttons I have. Then I measured out how wide each buttonhole should be and marked that out, and used the buttonhole attachment for my machine to do this. I'm doing the marking how wide the buttonhole should be because this specific machine does not have an automatic buttonhole sizer where it holds the button and knows how big it should be. Then I put a couple pins in either side of the buttonhole, and I used a seam ripper to open them up. I recommend doing the pins so you don't actually go too far, and then I hand stitched the buttons by first marking where each buttonhole lined up and then stitching the buttons there.
My top is finally done to match my shorts, and I will share with you the reveal in a minute, but first we have to make the sheared fabric dress. This is my sheared fabric, and as you can see, it's got this stretchy shearing up here and then nice flowy at the bottom. And the one seam dress basically says to take your bust measurement minus 2 inches and cut that out, sew it, and you'll have a dress. This is very long, so I'm going to be hemming it up, but other than that, and maybe adding some straps, we will be done with this project. So let's just get to the reveal after we do a quick little sewing. So there you have it. It's been a lot longer process than I initially anticipated. Part of that was due to how long it takes me to draft. Part of that was how long it takes to actually sew. And a good chunk of it was actually just like other life factors coming into play. But I now have this nice camp shirt with the sheared dress. I ended up not doing the straps yet, but that might be something I do later. I just kind of want to see how it feels without the straps first. I did get it hemmed to slightly below knee, which I kind of think that I might want to hem it up a little bit higher, but I wanted to get a feel for it first. And of course, I have some nice matching shorts. The top and the shorts together feel like ultra lounge, chilling out, you know, just very casual, comfortable, at home. And then the dress is like nicer going out. Shorts are not necessary with the length, but it, you know, gives me a nice feeling like I can do activities. And then the top, sun coverage for back, neck, shoulders. And overall, it was a very nice project. I'm very pleased with how everything came out, drafting and just sewing it together. There are things that I would definitely change going forward for the top, the shorts. It's hard to go like change up what I did with the dress, but you know, there's always room for improvement in any craft or anything that you do. So I've got some notes to take with me going forward, and I hope you enjoyed this video and you'll join me here in my Flock and Squawk some other time. I have a whole playlist. One of the projects that I've done in a video semi-recently is this puppy love sweatshirt, so if you want to go check that out, I highly recommend it. And, you know, I hope you enjoyed this video. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you Flock and Squawk again with me sometime. Bye!